You a lot.
Welcome, everybody, to our admin meeting for Tuesday, December 5th. Sarah, would you mind doing us a roll call?
Absolutely. Online, we have Shane Stack, MCAT, our newest employee, Christina Dewar, Melissa Fisher, and in the room, we have Kyle Waterman, Corey Destein, Doug Melton, Lois Macias, Colleen Rodeo. Right?
Close enough.
And Commissioner Strohmeyer, Vero, and I guess I'm thinking about Chris Lounsbury, Brian West, and Allison France.
Thanks, Sean. Before we dive in, do we have any public comment on items not on the agenda? All right. Seeing none, we'll jump to the consent agenda, which is really tight this morning. We can go right through it since there's nothing on there.
There's nothing there.
So our first item comes from our friend and colleague Shane Stack.
Yeah. Good morning, commissioners. Before you is an agreement between Missoula County and the Patty Canyon Landowners Association. Historically, during our winter months on weekends, Missoula County typically doesn't do a lot of winter maintenance. We do call outs, and so we'll get out to locations as necessary, but we don't always have people out in every location. And because of that, Patty Canyon folks reached out and wanted to figure out a way that we could provide weekend service on a more regular basis. And so we've developed an agreement where they'll pay $3,350 for weekend service. Public Works will match that, and that essentially gets us to about 15 or 16 trips up to Patty Canyon for a 4-hour service on a weekend day. So essentially, they're paying for a little bit more thorough weekend maintenance in the winter time. So,
And Shane, isn't the Forest Service contributing as well?
the Forest Service is going to contribute to the maintenance, but it's geared more towards the parking lots, and so we'll have more funding to do better maintenance in that area. But it's geared more towards the parking lot.
So I just got to talk on this one a little bit because I've spent a bunch of time working on this. I heard about this as an issue last year from some folks in Patty Canyon and brought it to Shane, who explained to me the added costs of working on Saturdays and Sundays and how we just don't have the money to do that. And then we brought this back to the Patty Canyon folks and said, maybe there's a way we could dream up a solution. Understanding that the reason why people were driving on snowy roads going up Patty Canyon on Saturdays and Sundays was to get to the Forest Service site to go cross-country skiing. So we reached out to the Forest Service, thought of all three interested parties could get together, combine some resources, we could take care of this. So before diving in on an RSID or something really big and permanent, this is kind of a pilot to see if it works. It took a lot of negotiating with Patty Canyon folks. Shane did a great job with the Forest Service, did a great job kind of masterminding the whole thing. It took a lot of work to get here for something dollar-wise that's really small. Hopefully it's provides the service people are after, and we see.
You're the reason it's not going to snow this winter.
Yeah, and if we did this, it will not snow on the weekend, or maybe at all. But I'm proud of everybody involved to get us to this point.
Yeah, I'm really excited. And yes, it's a great template.
Yeah.
Let's make it work. Thank you so much, Shane.
Yeah,
Call it a motion.
I will call that a motion. Well, yeah. So, well, actually, yeah, here, opportunity. Do you want to, if it does snow, like how does the maintenance happen, or how is it just decided?
So what we did is we allowed the Patty Canyon folks to kind of appoint some of their people as points of contact, points of communication. And so they will just send a text to our on-call folks. So we'll have, we've got a list of 4 text or 4 numbers that they just need to text. So they just text all 4 of those numbers and say, we need service today or tonight or whenever they think they want that service. We'll send a plow up there, and then we'll track the number of times they text and request, and then kind of keep a running tally of that and the actual costs associated with everything. But yeah, that's how it's going to work.
Great. Thank you. I move to approve the winter maintenance agreement with Patty Canyon Landowners Association.
I'll second that. Call for any public comment. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Shane.
Great, thanks.
Chris, you got the next two.
I do. So the first one here is pretty straightforward. It's an independent contractor agreement with Lori Francis. You all might remember Lori from Partnership Health Center. We're contracting with her to provide some additional support. As you know, Erica and Sarah have been working on a management series, an internal training program that we're developing for folks as they kind of move up through the organization. Sarah's kicked off doing some of those classes, and what we're doing here is hiring Lori Francis to help with some of that development, as well as do some one-on-one coaching with folks who are moving up through the organization to kind of help them in their leadership development. And so we're going to pilot this with Lori for a year and see how that works. And so that's what this agreement sets out, is the terms for that.
So generous of Lori. I thought she was going to enjoy retirement.
Not really a retirement. I could see her quite enjoying this. Yeah. She has a lot to offer.
Excellent. I move that we approve the independent contractor agreement with Lori Francis.
Okay, I'll second that. Call for any public comment. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so our next item here is why I think everybody else is. So as commissioners, as you're aware, during the pandemic, Missoula County was awarded funding from the federal government through the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, as we shorthand it here, specifically with those funds to be used for a variety of different services. And one of those services specifically called out is mental health services. And I think it's indisputable that in Missoula County, we saw a pretty big increase in the need for services, both on the mental health and the substance abuse front, both of which are contemplated by the American Rescue Plan Act. And so today what we're looking at is creating the authorization for creation of a revolving loan fund using some ARPA dollars that we have specifically set aside for mental health services that were budgeted specifically for the FY25 and FY26 year, and asking to use them as a revolving loan fund starting in fiscal year 24 to help bolster those services. And so throughout the course of the pandemic and throughout the last legislative session, some of what you heard was the fact that Medicaid rates and other contracts have not kept up with the actual cost of being able to provide those services. And that has left an unfortunate deficit, not only in the level of services that we can provide, but has created some real challenges for our largest provider here in Missoula County. And Colleen and crew are here to talk a little bit about this. And so what we've been doing is exploring the idea of creating a revolving loan service that providers could tap into to help carry them through as they get through this kind of process, and as Medicaid reimbursement rates, which were raised during the last legislative session, come online and can actually begin backfilling those costs, then these funds would eventually be paid back and still be available to use in the future. From the county side, just to be clear, this is a little challenging because we are looking specifically at just federal regulations, right? So we're looking specifically at the ARPA guidelines from the Treasury Department, which allow for the things of creation of a revolving loan fund, specifically talk about mental health services as being one of the areas where these funding is available. But it does create a little bit of challenge because we are having to create a program basically from whole cloth just around the guidance from the federal government without there being corresponding legislation in the state that specifically outlines what these kinds of programs would look like. And Brian can certainly answer more questions about that and what some of the challenges really are on the legal side for them when the state doesn't have kind of clear guidelines or anything really in statute that talks about how these federal programs that are authorized should look in a given state. So what the hope is today is for the commission to authorize the chair or to authorize staff to continue to move forward in this process, and then authorize the chair to potentially sign those agreements, with those agreements coming back to the commission next week for ratification when the whole commission is back. Unfortunately, this week, there isn't a Thursday meeting for us to be able to do that because the commissioners are already obligated to other things. And so that would kind of allow us to keep moving forward this week, get everything done, even potentially internally get things processed, but then have this come back so that, again, the full contract is before you for ratification after.
Next Thursday?
Next week, and I can't remember which admin you have.
Tuesday.
I think it's Tuesday
Okay.
next week is is the first admin that's available.
Brian's already worked through a bunch of this already. Is that right? We'll be doing that between now and
So Brian,
Just over the weekend.
before I ask, that's all.
so Brian maybe can frame, they've been exploring what options are available, and really, I want Brian to have a chance to speak, but really the federal regs are all that is out there.
Yeah. So should I hold my questions till next week?
That would probably be more
I'll
efficient.
gladly do that, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sam and Colleen, I don't know what your crew would like to.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a couple of different representatives here from the organization, knowing that this is a topic of high interest. You know, it's interesting when you talk about the snow. We've been in a mass blizzard. It kind of reminds me of the football game on Saturday night, right? Like the blizzard is just hitting this organization and everyone across the entire service sector in the face, and that's been relentless for years. For our organization, what we've seen over the last 6 months, I came in as the interim in the month of May, towards the end of the month of May, and since then we've seen our ability to expand our services, not only our school-based services, but also our preventative SUD services, our crisis services. A lot of this comes from that collaboration piece, you know, very similar to what you were out in our facility talking about, right? Like this challenge that any one organization, especially organization of our size, has to be solved through collaboration. It also has to be solved through us becoming extremely efficient in providing the services that we provide in a very specific way, as well as making sure that we have secondary funding and additional funding available for our organization. I'm going to have Kyle maybe speak, our board chair, to some of the things that are necessary across all of our counties, because the gap between what is approved, like with the state, with Medicaid, reimbursement rates, so on and so forth, the gap from that moment to the moment by which those resources are available, and that approval of those rates and that rate increase is fantastic, long overdue. I think that if you work with the Behavioral Health Alliance across Montana, you'll know that this has been a topic of theirs for quite some time, and previous leadership within our organization really was a huge advocate for it. That's wonderful. There's still a gap between when those funds are available and the operating expenses and requirements and obligations of the organization, especially as we see service requirements increasing. I think there's a lot of studies out there, but when you think about the fact that Western Montana Mental Health also oversees the 988 services for across 7 counties. Montana can be very proud, and we can be very proud that those services are ranked, you know, at the very top across the country as it relates to response rate. And our team has a lot to do with that. As a matter of fact, one of our team members will be speaking at the national level on the 988 911 model that they've created right here in Missoula to job shadow, to make sure that that continuum of care and that continuum of understanding is truly felt and understood across the board. But at the same side, you flip that page over and we're still at the very top across the nation for suicide rates and for mental health, crisis. So we have good things happening on one side, rate increases, Behavioral Health Alliance, collaboration, support from folks like you, great things happening on that side. Flip the page, we also have all of those other things on a day-to-day basis that this team here is responsible for making sure those that need those services, have those services available to them. And that's where this funding, this line of credit is going to truly give us that flexibility to ebb and flow between all of these other moving components across the system itself. Kyle, I don't know if you want to share anything else because you represent a very large continuum as well.
So again, Kyle Waterman, I'm coming down from Kalispell, board chair for Western right now.
Thanks for making the trip.
No, happy to do that. And thank you for the support and the conversation. I do think that what I look at from the board perspective and just from a regional perspective is to remember that Western is actually providing services for the region. And so for this third of Montana. So for me, I mean, that's how it looks like in services in Kalispell, but then also how we're reaching up to Eureka and Libby to provide services. And I think that everybody just understands that, as we have a headquarters here and a hub here, when challenges happen here, there ends up being a restriction. And so I think that there ends up being a ripple effect up the trap line of what happens. And that it sort of does when it comes down to 988, how this needs to be threaded through and working forward. I mean, things like 988 are services that have come online really since the pandemic and stuff like that. So we're in the middle of some things. There were some large changes in behavioral health and the pandemic that happened at the same time. We've had other challenges in Montana, but we're able to work forward with that. And so appreciate your consideration and support for Western here in Missoula, but how that also then ripples across the system. Because I think that this is regional. And I keep pointing out to these people, to everybody in Montana, we're still going to have to figure out these problems and these solutions ourselves. And this organization is a backbone to a lot of our communities. So it's not only for a stabilization unit here, but for the potential of having a stabilization unit up in Kalispell, and how that does actually then work regionally as we get up into even more frontier and rural areas of Montana. So thank you for the consideration.
Yeah, and I'll have Lois just speak very briefly as it relates to Western's involvement in some of the statewide efforts, because there is such good positive momentum happening. I know that a lot of times we get, once again, burdened with some of the negative that comes about, but there is so much that has occurred even in the last 6 months, not only in our organization, but just across the state. So I think Lois, as our representative, can speak a little bit to those positive progressions.
And I hope my mask isn't making anyone nervous. It's just precautionary. I have a friend who's COVID positive. So, and I spent some time with her this weekend. So that's the mask so that I can keep you guys safe. So we're participating in the CCBHC as a cohort 2 right now. We're hoping to move into cohort 1, which means that we would be first in line for some enhanced rates from CMS, which is the federal, as you know, the federal payer for Medicare, Medicaid services. And so we want to be as close to the front of that line as possible. So we're working with the state. I serve on the subcommittee and the steering committee. I also serve on the HB 872 subcommittee, and we get to have some influence. We just had our 4th and final meeting yesterday. So we're at the table and trying really hard to help influence. We're being heard. We know that we're being heard at the H72 Commission. We're seeing some emphasis on crisis, seeing emphasis on 988. And so we're really encouraged by that, encouraged that the state has set aside that $300 million plus the state planning grant for CCBHC so that we can be into the future, and we just need to get there.
Yeah, and I think that just wrapping it up, Corey and Doug, they're the ones that are strapped with helping this organization stay on track during this gap stage. Between Corey really working with our admissions, our receivables, working with our billables, making sure that our holds are not excessive, working with the state of Montana. We do have quite a bit in a suspense file and a hold file at the state of Montana, like many other organizations. It is a real pressure. So I can have Corey explain it, but essentially, and you can jump in there if I get it incorrect. Essentially, as services provided, everything goes through our provider. Everything has to be coded properly, so on and so forth. It gets submitted to the state, to their department. They then go through either an automated process. If in fact it goes into a suspense file, then it gets put into more of a manual process.
What is suspense file?
Suspense file would be perhaps there wasn't enough notes that reference the clinical care.
To get reimbursed.
To get reimbursed from Medicaid, correct. And so with the rate increase and with the retro payment that the state employees are working on top of the increase of service need and service requirements, so the frequency is there, plus you add on top of that the Medicaid redetermination process that's happening at the same time. So you've got redetermination, you've got ongoing reimbursement requests and working with organizations like ours. You've got retro considerations and retro validation for the rate pay that goes back to July 1. And then you just have anything else that comes at you in the face on a daily basis. You have that same team in Helena working vigilantly to try to accomplish all of those things. So that's another stacking effect, kind of like what Kyle was saying. If something doesn't go well here, it ripples out. When something doesn't happen in that department, it ripples out. And I think we can all attest that there's a lot of organizations across the state that might not have as diligent of a plan as Western has to deal with that and to address it. And I'll give you an example. Since May, we've been able to reduce the number of holds for our organization. Holds meaning they're not being processed on the other side, on our side of the organization by almost 60% since May.
Great.
So that's operational improvement. That's us being able to get on the other side of the equation, work with the state. Once again, collaboration and cooperation is the only way that we're going to accomplish all of this. So that kind of reflects that. Corey, did I describe that properly?
Are you guys finding willing collaborators on the state side?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like over the top. Like I was meeting with state representatives on that team on Friday after Thanksgiving. like they are all in to help and make sure that this gets resolved. I mean, it truly. At every level, but they're manually processing. I mean, there's only so many
You
fingers on
said
the
you
keyboard.
reduced holds by 60%.
60% on our side,
On our internal
on our
side,
internal side.
from an operational, making
Yep.
sure that all documentation's been collected to ensure billing. We've improved that by 60%. The manual holds on the state require, or the holds at the state level, once they're in Medicaid, require a manual review from the state. And that's what's
Yep.
slowing it
There's a
down.
line there.
So when we look at our cash flow and we start to say, okay, where can we pivot what we've got going on? When you know that you've got a manual process that is a barrier to your revenue being released, then you do everything you can to
Yep.
stay on the automated side of the equation.
Yeah.
So that's the work that Corey has been doing. And then Doug has been leading, of course, our charges and making sure the payables, receivables, services, and everything else. So it's a concerted effort internally, but we really could not accomplish what we're trying to accomplish for this organization and then ripple across all the communities that we serve without the collaboration from the city, the county, the state, the alliances. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing to witness. I think that it's just something that we can all be very proud of. So thank you for your consideration and your support.
Thanks.
We have everybody here for if there's questions.
Yeah. So
Doug, do you want to add anything?
Just that, the reimbursement is really tight and we're kind of in flux right now. And this availability of these funds will help us to, have a runway to get to where we need to get by the end of the fiscal year. And we've got some properties that are listed for sale that have buy-sells on them. And we just need to get from here to there and to straighten things out.
Yeah.
I'm just guessing then you're anticipating selling those properties and reducing the holds even further, cooperating with the
Yep.
state so things
Yeah.
go faster on there, and that after a few months the ship will be righted.
Well, and I don't even know if I would say that the ship will be righted because I don't like to reference that. I would say that the storm, I'm going to keep going off with a snowstorm analogy. I think that the storm will be more manageable. We'll be able to see it coming, manage it, have the resources to manage it, overcome it, move on to the next thing. Right. So I feel like the ship itself is navigating all of the components and all of the variations and all the variables that are happening across our entire state. I'll
Good goggles on now.
You just have to have goggles on. I always use the analogy that there's like an octopus on our faces, right? You just got to get that off your face long enough so you can see what's going on. The Crisis Receiving Center here in Missoula is a perfect example. Right, like we've had, Kyle is taking Representative Keenan and others through our facility up there in Kalispell. We're in the process of taking everything that we did here in Missoula, architectural designs, so on and so forth, and being able to start the conversation with the Kalispell city county community so we can perhaps do the same great work up there and add that Crisis Receiving Center as part of that continuum of care for that community and for that entire region. So we can't do that, to Doug's point, if we're just trying to figure out, all right, how much is the Medicaid reimbursement next week? Okay, how much is it the week after? So it's a concerted effort. I'm really proud of what the team has done to improve those internal operations. It's been, like I said, it's been a beautiful thing to be part of and absolutely a great thing to watch. We always have more room to go, but yes, Q1 2024, at the end of that period of time, we are going to have some additional properties that we are going to be moving on to other parties. The pandemic changed the way that we do work. Telehealth became an acceptable, reasonable approach in a lot of ways. And so we, like many other organizations, had available assets that need to either be repurposed, Crisis Receiving Center in Missoula, Crisis Receiving Center in Kalispell, and or transitioned for other purposes by other organizations. Our Bozeman campus is a perfect example of that. So a lot of variations happening. But once again, that runway that Doug is speaking to, that's really the thing that's going to make the difference for us right now.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Glad that we had time to share with you guys more details. So I'm glad your agenda was a little bit lighter today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't have anything.
So really the motion today would be to direct staff to continue and to authorize the chair to sign as needed and then to bring those documents to Tuesday's advent for commissioner review and public if that sounds
I
appropriate.
will make that motion continue.
I'll second that and ask for any public comment. Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
I,
Thanks for making the trip.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for
Good
having
job
us.
moving things through the storm.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thanks for setting up the analogy. I know you organized your agenda accordingly.
All right, I believe we are done. Thanks, everybody.
All right, travel safely.
Yeah.
All right, thank you
Thank
guys,
you.
appreciate it.
The little red button ends the recording.